Introduce the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Thanks. Hey, everybody. How you doing? Hey. Morning. Hey, Tom. See you in a little bit.
So,
No lunch, huh?
no, but we have a portable one for you. One thing, though, I want to congratulate the Speaker on, and I normally don't do this for the guests. I normally don't start off with something really positive, but he didn't wear a tie, and so I got to take my tie off, which
Because I didn't think you'd care.
Yeah, I know.
Good,
so
good.
Let's hear it for the Tieless Friday.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Go ahead, take it off, you guys. Yeah.
So, what have you been doing?
Not much, just punching the clock. Yeah.
How you holding up?
Doing fine, doing well. It's good to be home.
Yeah, do you get a sense of relief when you...
Yeah, I do.
What is it? Is it like, in Wisconsin, if you get across Highway 10, it's like...
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I typically fly into O'Hare these days. It's just better flight options. And so you're just coming across the border. You see the Wisconsin sign at the rest area there, then see Beloit, see Carry Ingredients on the right, and it's just sort of the stress rolls off you, and you roll into home, and things are back to normal. It's nice.
No tolls?
Yeah, well, I-Pass, those things are kind of obnoxious. But they're better than the old days. We had to put, like, the change in the thing. Yeah. But no tolls, right, Dave? Right, okay.
Oh, boy. All right. You don't want to comment on that.
Yeah. No,
and that's not even on my
These
question.
guys over at the state will figure that out.
They're like, oh, my God, don't talk about those. Okay, so we're going to talk about the tax bill and then a few other things, okay?
Okay, sure.
All right. Let me start with a macro question.
With the what?
Macroeconomics.
Yeah, sure.
This is really difficult
great.
territory for me.
You just piqued my interest.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, journalists can't add, but, I read this somewhere. Okay, so we have a good economy, near full employment, and then, so why the need to pass a big stimulus bill, a big tax cut bill, and add billions and billions to the deficit? That seems like contrary thinking.
I think the reason we have a good economy and we're going to get a better economy is because of our macroeconomic policy that we practiced in 2017. Two basic things: regulatory relief, which was crippling businesses, holding back investment, and the tax reform bill. So the anticipation of the tax reform bill, I think, was good. Now the existence of the tax reform bill is why you're seeing the kind of investment decisions being made. Just in 20 days after passing this thing, 2 million people are getting bonuses. People are getting wage increases. People are getting benefit increases, more 401k matching. And that's before the IRS has put out the withholding tables the other day showing that around 90% of Americans are going to see bigger paychecks when the withholding tables take effect next month. So that's why we're seeing a good economy, I would strongly argue. So had we not done the tax bill, we would not have the setup question you had, which is the economy's looking really good. If we did not do the tax bill, I have no doubt in my mind, and I have no knowledge of this, Assurant would still be processing its way to Bermuda, not staying in Milwaukee. We would have had all of these inversions taking off. And so I think the tax bill was absolutely critical because what it does is it says it makes sense to stay an American company. It makes sense to make things in America. It makes sense now to take the money you make overseas and bring it back into America and invest in this country. So that, to me, was absolutely essential. This has been over 30 years in the making, and we had the worst tax code in the industrialized world, and we were losing big time as a country as a consequence of that. And now we have one of the best tax codes in the industrialized world, and people, Wisconsin, businesses are all going to benefit as a consequence of that.
All right, what about the deficit? You guys used to really care about the deficit.
Funny thing is we still do. But there's two things you've got to do. You've got to get the economy growing. You've got to get people having jobs and paying taxes so that revenues are growing, so that the economy is growing, and you got to work on spending. And the spending that is really the culprit, the spending that is the big driver of our upcoming debt crisis, which will happen in the future of our deficits, is the entitlement spending. I'm kind of a broken record on this. In the House, we've been passing these bills. In the House, we passed our health care bill, which was the biggest entitlement reform bill ever considered by a Congress ever. We passed a budget which cut $7.4 trillion out of the budget just a few months ago. So the challenge is getting these things into law and getting them through the razor-thin majority in the Senate, getting the White House on board. And, that's been a challenge on entitlement reform, not just this Congress, but every single Congress. So we're going to keep working at that. What I think is going to be our big emphasis this year, and I don't want to, you're going to ask me these things, is workforce development. And it's getting people off the sidelines into the workforce. I think that's going to be a huge issue. We're pretty darn good at it here in Wisconsin, but there's more work to be done nationally. And I think that is going to help us on the spending side of ledger too. The less people are in a system where they're trapped in taking benefits and not working, that costs money, but it also costs them opportunity. It costs us not having their talents. And the more we can get people into the workforce, making money, paying taxes, it's better for everybody. It's better for the federal fisc. It's better for people. It's better for our economy. And that's going to be our big emphasis.
Okay, a little bit on entitlement reform. So, I guess some people who in the social services community say, well, this is a big trap. The Republicans pass a big tax cut bill, builds up the deficit to $1.5 trillion over 10 years, and then that forces
not in the least.
Okay.
We have to do this no matter what. You can't tax your way out of our debt problems, out of our deficit problems. You have to get economic growth. It's always been two things: reform our programs so that they are solvent, and grow our economy. Look, healthcare is the biggest driver of our problems, fiscally speaking. It's not what we call discretionary spending. Money we spend on government agencies like the Pentagon. That's really not the big driver of our debt pressures. It's not a Republican-Democrat thing. It's really just a baby boomer thing. They're retiring. We're not ready for their retirement. And the benefits grow much faster than the economy or tax rates do, or tax revenues do. And health inflation's got to be our big thing. Again, we're pretty good at this in Wisconsin, but we have to have a better strategy nationally. We passed a comprehensive bill in the House. We're going to have to work on this, kind of incrementally, I think, to get at the root cause of health inflation, to make healthcare a more innovative, competitive system that doesn't give us these massive premium increases in inflation rates, which end up costing us big debt problems.
Okay, so back to the tax bill. So how's that helping, let's say, the ex-GM worker in Janesville who's trying to piece it together? Didn't leave the state for a job or whatever, or hasn't maybe found a real good job?
Yeah. It's a great question. So we're getting businesses coming back into America. We just sold the plant on December 22nd to a developer, CDC. This is in Janesville.
You mean
the
GM
old
GM
the GM facility. We just sold. It was 4 million square feet. We just sold it off. It's being redeveloped, and it's being redeveloped and marketed in a good economy, so we can get more employers coming in to Janesville, so that disaffected GM worker, a bunch of people I grew up with, who may still be looking for a better job, have better opportunities because there's a better economy. If they're in a job, if they're working, the average middle-income taxpayer here in Wisconsin gets a $2,000 tax cut right away. And that's before you see the wage increases that are now resulting from the tax law changing. And you see businesses now investing. If a business wants to buy a piece of that property in Janesville, Wisconsin now, because of this tax law, number one, if they're international, they can bring the money overseas and invest it there. Number two, if they want to build something, hire people, buy plant and equipment, they can write it off immediately, call it expensing. It's a huge incentive to build factories in Wisconsin, build factories in America, and hire people to run those.
Okay, so this is what we would call repatriation of these. Okay, now there's a contrary argument that has emerged since the tax bill became law that this, in fact, the setup of the tax bill will encourage more creation of offshore operations because do you buy that or not?
No, not in the least. It's the flip of logic. This is what a lot of progressives made this argument, and here's basically how it goes. And look, this is the stuff I've worked on for a long time, so I've spent a lot of my time in this space. Take Johnson Controls. I know they don't like it when I mention this, but Johnson Controls, their headquarters is in Cork, Ireland. It is not here in Milwaukee. They still have a lot of presence here. It's a great company, but their headquarters is in Cork, Ireland, not in Milwaukee, because they made this decision prior, a year or two ago, because their worldwide tax rate's 12.5% by being an Irish company. Last year, it was 35% by being an American company. And if they wanted to bring that money back into America, they had all this repatriation hurdle. Now, they can bring the money back any day they want without a penalty, and their tax rate's 21%, which is a point below the worldwide average. So what the progressives were saying was, well, if they're overseas and they make money overseas, tax them on what they make overseas right away at the American rate and the overseas rate. So America would be the only country in the world to double tax all of our exports, all of the money. Let's take Harley, for example. Let's make it simple. Harley makes a hog in America. They make parts in Milwaukee. Harley makes a motorcycle here. They send it to Germany. Under the way the tax law worked last year, they would pay that German tax, and then if they brought that money back to America, they'd pay the extra American tax. Nobody else did that. What the progressives were saying is, no. Have them pay the German tax when they sell that motorcycle in Germany, and then at that time, the American tax. So if, Honda is selling a Goldwing over from Japan into Germany, what they did and do was they paid the German tax, they'd be done, there'd be no more tax, they bring the money back into Japan and reinvest it. What the progressives were saying is, no, have America pay the German tax and the American tax on Harley. It would have killed us. It would have made U.S. businesses repatriate immediately. We would have seen so many U.S. businesses, for survival's sake, have to become foreign companies just to survive under this logic that people have been saying. So here's what we did with the current tax law, and here's how it works today. Harley makes a motorcycle in America, sends it to Germany, sells it in Germany. They pay the German tax. They're done. They can bring that money back to Milwaukee and reinvest it like every other country in the world. That puts us on a level playing field with the rest of the world. And so I totally reject the logic that we should not have done this.
Okay, let's talk
Sorry,
about...
I get a little bit going on
Oh,
this
no,
stuff,
no, but that's okay.
You understand that?
No, that's okay. You're heating up. This is good. That's good. I'm gonna get you to make news yet. You just watch. You watch. All right. Okay, but the biggest, isn't Apple have the most money parked overseas?
Yeah.
So what's the incentive for them?
Well, I talked to Tim 3 days ago about this. The guy who makes these watches I just got, and I still don't know how to use. Got it for Christmas. I've been buying Iron Man watches at Farm and Fleet for my entire life, basically. And, I'm still figuring this thing out.
It's time to step up.
Yeah, it is. You want to see what my heart rate is right now? So I can figure that out. They have the biggest overseas pile of money. And I've talked to the Apple people and Tim Cook for years about this. Now they can bring that money back. Now, because of our tax laws, they can reinvest that money into this country. They're in the middle of figuring out what they're going to do. I'm not going to get ahead of what their announcement is. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. But before, they basically had to keep that money overseas or pay a prohibitive, uncompetitive tax to bring it back. Now they can bring that money back. So that is, I think it's like over $200 billion that they now could not before, but can now bring that money back into this economy.
So you're pretty sure this stuff's really going to happen?
It's going to be great. I mean, look, just take a look at the announcements we've seen in the last 20 days. Walmart just extended their maternity leave policy. They just increased by about 20% their minimum wage. They also
closed some stores.
That was a business decision they were already making, but they said because of the tax laws, they did these things. Bank of America, AT&T, there are small businesses here in Wisconsin that just kind of fly under the radar screen that are now doing things. I've talked to friends in Janesville, Wisconsin, restaurateurs who are going to be building out, buying more, doing more as a result of this tax law. So it is, and if we did not do this, we would continue to penalize our economy with a severely uncompetitive tax system. And because we did this, we're going to have faster economic growth, the kind we can have. And the next focus, I think, is going to have to be on people. We did the sort of physical capital, if you will, tax rates, tax laws, tax reform, regulatory costs, regulatory reform. We got to go focus on people now. And that means, how do we close this skills gap we've got? How do we close this opportunity gap? How do we get people who are coming out of prison rehabilitated and redeemed so they can get on their feet? How do we make sure that we can get, and this is what you hear. I see businesses that I know right around here, the biggest concern I hear these days is we need people. We need people with skills. I mean, I see Ed Lump over here. I mean, we need people with skills to be able to do these jobs that are there for them. So that, to us, is going to be our biggest priority. And that, to me, means if we close this skills gap and reverse this brain drain that we have, we're going to do such a better job of getting people into great lives, into great careers, and the economy will grow even faster as a result. So that's really going to be our 2018 focus.
Okay, so you argued that this was an economic necessity to do this bill. It was also a political necessity, let's face it, right? So, but how's this helping your caucus? You have all these retirements happening. Are those folks not getting the message that this is going to help them?
No, it was something I pretty much expected. One thing we do differently than the Democrats is we term limit our chairman, and I'm a big believer in that. I would not have been a chair of 2 committees had we not had term limits. And it causes a lot of turnover in the House Republicans. And you can be a chairman of a committee for 6 years. And when you're done with that 6 years, you're no longer a chairman of a committee. And most of our chairmanships are on the same cycle since we started this. So most of our committee chairmen are people who are done at the end of this year. And most people in Congress, when they're done with their chairmanships, not all, but most, typically leave after that. And so that's basically what we have. When you take a look at the list of the races, a smaller fraction of those seats are really what I would call sort of toss-up swing seats. If you look at the Democrat retirements, it's about the same fraction, close to the same number of toss-up swing seats. So I don't see this cycle as any different other than the fact that our term limits laws are working as expected. Term limit rules, it's not a law, it's a rule.
So the tax cut law, the tax cut bill, is not starting off high in the opinion polls. And I guess I can't help but thinking if you're a Republican congressman in a swing district, like, wow, this isn't looking so good. You don't think that enters into the picture at all?
No, I don't. Here's why. And I do think the Democrats made a miscalculation by every single Democrat opposing it in both the House and the Senate. I think they believe this is our Obamacare, that when they passed on a party line vote Obamacare, they thought it was going to be wildly popular, really successful, and it wasn't. Massive premium increases, loss of choices, plans pulling out, monopolies, no plans in many counties in America. And it proved to be really unpopular, and they took a hit in the next election as a result of it in 2010. I think they think this is the flip for us, and here's why we really don't see it that way. This law is becoming more popular once it gets enacted. This law, once people actually realize what it actually does do, is popular. It's been hit and savaged, and pundits have been slamming it with a bunch of falsehoods that don't exist. So that now that you see what it actually does, we believe the story just gets better. You're going to see more jobs, more investment, higher take-home pay, lower taxes for people, and that is a good thing, not a bad thing, versus higher health care premiums, pullouts, loss of choices, collapsing exchanges. So I really do see this as quite different, and I do believe that the story of the economy, because these policies affect the economy, and the economy is improving as a result of these policies, I think that's a pretty good thing to run into 2018 on. Having said that, we've got a pretty tough headwind in front of us, historically speaking. Historically speaking, the trend is that the party of the president does poorly, loses on average, I think, 32 seats in the House in the president's first midterm, no matter what president or what party that is.
And that's magnified if the president's poll number.
Yeah, right.
Lousy.
So yeah, they call it the generic ballot and things like that. So historically speaking, if history's any guide, history says we should lose 32 seats in November. We have a 24-seat majority. So we have to buck history, and we know that we have a challenge in front of us to do that. Now, the reason I feel confident and comfortable is because we ran on a set of ideas and policies. We're now implementing and executing those ideas and policies, and the results are proving themselves. So we will have results to talk about and improve on to show this is what we said we would do, this is what we did, and look at how it's working. The one big regret I have is that the Senate couldn't pass the Obamacare bill by one vote, the Obamacare replacement bill. Right. And I really do believe that would have done a lot to give us more healthcare freedom, lower prices, more choices, and it would get us more insurers back into the marketplace.
Okay, so this tax bill gets rid of the health care mandate. So you guys have been, even though you haven't repealed Obamacare per se, you've been chipping away at it, and the administration's been chipping away at it. Yet, the Obamacare signups were very robust considering the sign-up period. Doesn't that tell you that people want that product?
It tells me people are getting exasperated, and they're down to very few bad, expensive options. And the numbers are way off the original projections. The numbers are way off what CBO thought they would be. What I would like to be able to see us do is give like Wisconsin, give us the ability to go back to putting our risk pool back together. When we had the HRSP here, the high-risk pool in Wisconsin, it worked really well. And what it did was it gave people with catastrophic illnesses guaranteed insurance that was affordable. It worked really well here in the state. I see some healthcare people here. It worked well, and you could go to any doctor and hospital, basically, in Wisconsin, and you had better choices in premiums and deductibles than you do today. And by directing that coverage to the catastrophic person, you dramatically lower the cost of care for everybody else, the premiums, and you give more choices. I'm still hopeful that we can try and get that back together this year for all states, but because we know how well it works here in Wisconsin, Obamacare stopped us from doing that. and it was a big mistake. And I'm hopeful. I've talked to Susan Collins and Democrats about this. I think there may be a bipartisan opportunity there to get risk pools, risk mechanisms. In Maine, they do risk sharing. In Alaska and Wyoming, I think it is, they do risk reinsurance. We do risk pools. It's basically different ways of saying, let's all agree that a person with a catastrophic illness should not go bankrupt if they get sick, and let's deal with that, and let's deal with that intelligently so that the other 90+% of the people in this market, the individual market, can get affordable coverage. That's just a no-brainer in my mind. Obamacare repealed that, but I would like to think we could probably make some progress on that. And I think that will help us with health inflation, with health competition and choice, now that the individual mandate is gone. You can buy what you want.
Okay, so the last time a tax cut bill of this, or a tax overhaul bill of this magnitude passed was with Ronald Reagan, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there was bipartisanship then, maybe forced bipartisanship because the Democrats controlled the House. So
yeah, why not now?
Whatever happened to bipartisanship?
Yeah, there aren't any Bill Bradley Democrats around these days.
Well, you mentioned Susan Collins.
She's a Republican.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
that was a trick question.
I know there's a confusion.
That was a trick question.
Yeah. So,
where's my fact checker?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you're my fact checker.
Yeah, I'm your
That's
fact
good.
checker.
I'm glad I got
voted
that
for the
right.
tax bill.
Okay. I'll keep thinking of one.
There just aren't.
Okay, I'm going to come up with one.
No, I knew Bill Bradley's a great guy, and Bill,
a basketball player.
Yeah, he was a pro basketball player. And my mentor
least I
Jack
knew
Kemp was
that.
an architect of that, so I've heard all the stories back in those days. Democrats back then agreed with what we were trying to do. So you had the discussion we just had about a territorial system versus a worldwide system, which is what that conversation was. Democrats just don't agree with that. It's just a philosophical thing. They're just farther left on these kinds of issues than they used to be. And I'm not saying our party's perfect. It's not. But I'm just saying on an issue like that, they just did not want to participate.
Yeah, but did you allow them to participate? Did
We
you help?
certainly
Did you try?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I worked. Look, I won't go into the. Yes is the answer. I won't do the tit for tat. But
It's just between us. Nobody.
That's all right.
You can't give one example?
Actually, I'm going to be just kind to the Democrats that we tried talking with and working with, and not throw them under the bus.
Well, okay. All right, there's a lot of real estate people here too. And so there's the $10,000 cap on
Sure.
the local property tax deduction. That's not affecting this state probably as much as New
Right.
Jersey and California, but I mean, there is an effect. Why don't you explain that? Because
this was the biggest tax expenditure we dealt with to pay for lower rates across the board for everybody else. So what this is a state and local tax deduction. We call it SALT. What the bill does, before it was just uncapped. So you could endlessly deduct your state and local property taxes and income taxes. And we capped that to $10,000 for property and income and sales taxes, total of $10,000. That freed up the fiscal space so we could lower everybody's tax rates across the board. What this issue was doing was, it was basically states that got their act together, balanced their budget, lowered their taxes, were effectively cross-subsidizing states that didn't. So let's just take Wisconsin versus Illinois. I mean, I just see Dave Craig. I think I see some other legislators here. I see Alberta over there. I mean, they did their jobs. And we, as a result, do not have massive fiscal problems. We don't have a big pension problem. We did our jobs in Wisconsin. So should we be paying higher tax rates at the federal level so that states that have not fixed their problems, like Illinois, to pay for that? That's basically what we were doing. We, Wisconsinites, were cross-subsidizing states that did not have their fiscal house in order. And so why should we be having the federal tax code do that? So what we did was we made sure that this tax benefit basically accrued to middle-income taxpayers. By limiting it $10,000, it's real wealthy people, basically, who don't get that deduction. And what we did was we were able to lower everybody's tax rates across the board as a result of it. So to me, it's just a pure fairness argument. And all tax rates go down in this tax law because of this.
Yeah, but it's going to affect the real estate market, isn't it?
No, I don't think it will. I think you take a look at everything else that's involved, where you can, we shortened the period of writing off real estate investments. We lowered tax rates. There are so many things in here that's going to help all sectors of our economy, including real estate, that I think is going to be very beneficial. And by the way, the mortgage interest deduction is still set at $750,000. And, you know, Wisconsinites like to have a place up in Tomahawk and Minocqua and in the South. You can still do 2 mortgages under that. There aren't a whole lot of people with $750,000 of mortgage in Wisconsin. So as far as we are concerned, I think this law is really good for us.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to some other things. Is that all right?
I figured you would.
Okay. All right, so the president said something yesterday, or reported.
He said a lot of things yesterday. Which one are you talking about?
That's a word I can't mention.
Yeah.
It's about African countries. It's about immigration, which is tied into your job because, well, you have a week from now, there's another deadline on the government shutdown. Immigration's a big part of that. His comments obviously inflame a debate that's not hard to inflame, but,
right.
you know, so really,
yeah,
what's your reaction to that?
I spent my day on 702 yesterday, so I wasn't sure what you were talking about, which is a FISA thing. Yeah, I read those comments later last night. So first thing that came to my mind was very unfortunate, unhelpful. But you know what I thought of right away? I thought about my own family. My family, like a whole lot of people, came from Ireland on what they called coffin ships then, came here, and worked the railroads. The Irish were really looked down upon back in those days. I hear all these stories from my relatives about Irish need not apply. We could basically get construction jobs, cops, or firefighter jobs. And James and Catherine Ryan came over, literally worked the railroad until they had enough money to buy a farm, which happened to be outside of Janesville, Wisconsin. Then their son, my great-grandfather, started a railroad embankment business with horse plows, and it's an earth-moving business to the day run by my cousins. It is a beautiful story of America, and that is a great story. And that is the story we have today, and that is the story we had yesterday, and that is what makes this country so exceptional and unique in the first place. So I see this as a thing to celebrate, and I think it's a big part of our strength. Whether you're coming from Haiti, we've got great friends from Africa in Janesville who are doctors who are just incredible citizens. And I just think it's important that we celebrate that. Having said that, you're trying to ask me about DACA. I think that's where you're going with this,
but I mean, it inflames. You have.
So
you're trying to broker a deal, right? And
yeah.
now
So
how do you do that with this?
So we just have to get it done. I'm actually hopeful that the talks that actually started about a week ago. We've been talking quite a bit. It's not as if we haven't been, but we started at the White House with an agreement that the 4 deputies, the number 2 leaders in the House and the Senate. Because Dick Durbin is the number 2 guy in the Senate. He's sort of the leading Democrat on this issue. Kevin McCarthy from California understands the issue really well. Our majority leader, Steny Hoyer in Maryland, and John Cornyn, Texas border state guy, knows the issues really, really well. The 4 of them have started bipartisan talks, trying to aggregate all the ideas that are out there to come to a consensus. Do we need to fix DACA? Yes, we need to fix DACA. But I think it's really important we fix it in such a balanced way that it, A, gets strong bipartisan support, that it, B, does it in a thorough way so that we don't have a DACA problem 5-10 years down the road. You don't want to just fix the symptom and not the root cause, so you've got to deal with that. And C, you have a balanced DACA solution that has the security components along with a DACA fix, and then that gets you a bipartisan support for fixing a lot of these broken immigration problems. So that's what I want to see come out of this, which is not just some little discrete fix for this particular little problem, but let's put together a solution that starts knocking down some of these other thorny problems we've got in the immigration system. Ultimately, I think we should go to a merit-based immigration system. And the reason I say that is, we sort of fixate on labor force, and I was talking about workforce development. If we get every single able-bodied American who is not now working or looking for work, and close that skills gap, get them from poverty into the workforce, we're still going to need people in this country.
Right, you don't want to ship 200,000 Salvadorans back, right?
Well, that's the TPS thing. That's but I'm just saying
that exacerbates the labor shortage.
Correct, but I'm just saying we still need to. I think we need to rework our immigration system so that the visas are not given based on relations other than the nuclear family, but are based on skills, based on what we need. We're going to need people with our dairy industry in western Wisconsin. They need people in the vegetable industry in California. We're going to need, after we find every single software engineer in southeastern Wisconsin for Foxconn, we're going to need more, that kind of thing. So that's why I think I'd like to take this opportunity to fix this particular problem, which does need to get fixed, but also try and knock down some of the other problems so we can get some solutions here.
Does it get attached to the spending
No,
bill?
it won't do that. We have to keep those separate because that's just not good government. It's just lopping all this stuff together. So I think people are attaching them in their minds as far as leverage is concerned, but they won't be technically attached as far as legislation is concerned.
So is there going to be a government shutdown?
No, I don't think there will be because I think we're making progress on what we call the caps deal. That's something that I'm working on with Schumer and McConnell and Pelosi. I think we're making progress on that, but I think the Democrats, and I understand why, it's about the only leverage they have, they want to see a path for DACA. They want to see that it's not just going to get kicked down the road, that it's going to get resolved. I want to get it resolved too. I also want to get this caps agreement resolved because, frankly, my big concern there is our military. We have hit our military.
In other words, you want a longer term bill instead of a stopgap bill. It's still a temporary.
We will have to do something short term because it's too short a notice for the Appropriations Committee to write a longer term bill. So they just technically wouldn't be able to write it. But my personal concern in this area is our Air Force is the smallest it has ever been. Half our Navy planes can't fly. About 10 of our Army combat brigade teams are only about 10 of them are combat ready. And we are seeing more and more training fatalities and accidents because of our military funding. We had 2 ships collide. You're familiar with this over in the Pacific. So this is becoming a fairly dire thing, and we've got to fix that too. So there's just a lot of big things that need to get done. We've got a lot of what I call pots on the stove right now, and I'm confident we're going to get them done. As to exactly what date that's going to happen, I'm not so sure because people, other than just ourselves, have a say-so in that.
So what happens, though, on a week from today? Don't you have a deadline?
We do have a deadline, and I think we'll make some bigger. We had CHIP that's going to run out of money. In Wisconsin, we're okay, but Minnesota next door, they're running out of money in like 10 days. So I think we will get a down payment on some of these problems, and then keep fighting, keep working to get the rest of it done.
Okay, let's take some questions from out here in the audience, and so I have to make sure I don't get caught up in the web, so to speak. Go ahead, Mike. You're close.
Thanks.
Introduce yourself too, if you don't mind.
So, yeah, Mike Nichols from the Badger Institute
Yeah.
was WPRI speaker. So workforce participation,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, I think we're at about 68%.
Right, which is really good compared to the national average.
Yeah, which is I think 5 percentage points higher than elsewhere, but still a lot lower than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So the question is, how much leeway or room do we really have to increase that in Wisconsin? And wondering if you can maybe reference some specific policies, both at the federal and the state level, that would help us increase that.
Yeah.
workforce
Eloise and I have talked
participation
about that. You know Eloise Anderson? I think she's got some really good ideas, especially here in Milwaukee City, Milwaukee County, and in Racine and Kenosha. I still believe that there are more opportunities to get bigger workforce labor participation, especially among low-income people. So I'm a big fan of what I call evidence-based policies, which we are making pretty good progress on. I want to give the state more flexibility to be able to target resources to work support programs and work first programs to get people from welfare to work. I think I think we kind of know how to do that. There are some really good programs here. Milwaukee Works does pretty well here, and so I think we've got to invest in those. I think at the federal level we got to give more flexibility to it, and I think having some work requirement and work support requirements is going to help us move those numbers better. So I think there's more progress to be made, particularly among people who are in what I call the poverty trap, where you lose more than you gain by going to work. You lose more in benefits than going to work. We've run numbers recently, and the highest tax rate's not going to be, some Aaron Rodgers, paying 37%. It's going to be a single mom with 2 kids with 24 grand in benefits is going to lose 80 cents on the dollar if she goes and takes a job. We've got to figure out how to make it always pay to work. And she's got problems, right? She needs transportation and probably child support, and then be able to go get a GED or go to MATC and Gateway, get a skill, get a trade. She can get a job probably at Freighter, probably at Foxconn. So how do we figure out how she can get there? And I think there's more work to be done to do that. At the same time, I think prison reform and criminal justice reform is something we should be looking at too, because there's a lot of people who just can't, get a job because of something in their past, but they're completely redeemable. And so I think there's more work to be done there. That's why I do think that these numbers are better in Wisconsin than they are nationwide, but there's a lot more work to be done in that area. And that's what we want to spend our year focusing on. And then we're doing a better job here, like I said, with skills training. I think employers need to be more involved in setting up curriculum with sort of the gateways and the MATCs of the world, so that they're actually training workers with jobs that actually exist, so that they have the skills they'll actually need. And I think we need to do a better job nationally to reintegrate and combine employers with educators, so we have a skills set that's going to be needed. Like Brian Albright down at Gateway in Racine is designing an entire Foxconn curriculum and a campus for it. Things like that are things I think we should be able to do. And so I see a lot of opportunity here with that. If we can get these education dollars back so Dave, Craig, and Alberta and the rest can figure out how to customize this for Wisconsin. We've got this great water play here. We've got a lot of kind of interesting stuff here. And so that's why I think we can do a whole bunch more in Wisconsin in particular, but nationwide.
Okay, back here, Mr. Speaker.
Where are you, Mayor? Okay.
Way back here.
All right.
Hi, Speaker. Good to see you again. Chris Rosh from 16th Street Community Health Centers. We're a federally qualified health center.
You're on the list of things I was mentioning as I was saying at the end of the year. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so where are we at with the CHIP funding? Because we face a cut as well. It would be about 10% for 16th Street of our overall budget for many community health centers.
Yeah, so we're big fans of CHCs. Community health centers are really cost effective, do a good job. They really are very, very, the dollar stretches farther at those things. So we will get this done. Exactly when, I'm not so sure. I have my own opinion on when it should be done, sooner rather than later. We just got a new baseline change in S-chip, which is making it easier to get that legislation passed. That is part of the bipartisan negotiations we're having right now, and we're making some pretty good progress, and I think we'll get this done fairly soon.
Yes, hello, Mr. Speaker. I'm Ben Sherman. Quick question. It was interesting you mentioned the work on the DACA bill, bipartisan. What goes on that we don't see behind the scenes? Yeah. Do the Republicans and the Democrats work together?
We actually talk to each other. Yeah, you don't see us talking to each other. We actually do talk to each other. We actually do. What happens, I find, is when the TV cameras are on, the microphones are on, everybody goes to their corner and they say their thing, peel to their base, and then when those microphones get turned off and the TV cameras are off, we go talk to each other and say, okay, let's figure out how. We actually do that. 80% of what we do in Congress is bipartisan. You wouldn't know that. You really, and if you actually sat there and watched what we do on a daily, weekly basis, 8 out of 10 of the bills that we pass out of Congress, we passed more bills in this last year, in the first year of a presidency, than you saw passed in Obama, Clinton, or both Bush presidencies, just this last year. And 8 out of 10 of those things are totally bipartisan bills. The bill we passed yesterday, which is about terrorism, and I won't go into the details other than it's about how we track foreign terrorists on foreign soils. It was a big bipartisan vote count. So most of what we actually do is bipartisan. It's just the real partisan stuff that is the conversation that you talked about.
Oh, blame it on me.
Well, we talked about the tax bill, so yeah.
Hi, Mr. Speaker. Kathy Kuhn from the Medical College of Wisconsin. Congratulations on getting the tax bill passed. Just curious, whenever a bill that size passes, obviously there's winners and losers. Any chance that there's going to be an opportunity to take a look at some of the issues that...
Yeah, technical corrections, you mean?
So, real specifically...
The endowment?
Yeah.
Yep, I know your issues, yeah.
Explain what that means. Explain what you're talking about.
Yeah, so do you want to do it, or go ahead? You can go ahead if you want. The endowment tax. So Medical College got caught up in the endowment tax. So the federal taxes really large foundations, which are nonprofit, but in many cases operate like big businesses or hedge funds, taxes them with a 1.4%, I think, excise tax. Really large college endowments, in the billion-dollar category typically, were not paying that excise tax. So in the interest of fairness, the tax that you apply to big foundations was going to be applied to really big endowments, because the concern was a lot of these endowments weren't passing those savings on to students through scholarships or lower tuition. They were just piling up endowments and building buildings and not going into students for support. That's the thinking. Because of the uniqueness of the medical college, it got caught up in this endowment tax, which taxes like, I don't know, a small number of universities, very small number. It's the only one in Wisconsin that is affected by this. So what you're asking is there going to be an opportunity for technical corrections? Because anytime you're rewriting the entire IRS tax code, which is basically what we just did, which really needed to be done, there are clearly going to be anomalies and unforeseen circumstances that occur when that happens. And so the answer is yes, we have always envisioned, in every big tax rewrite that has ever been done, there's clearly follow-up technical corrections that occur. And we're just now sort of gathering what those things are. We just moved from a worldwide system to a territorial system, which is a sea change on how we tax ourselves internationally. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that there are going to have to be some changes in how that is executed and implemented.
Okay, question here.
Mr. Speaker, Sam Wilson with AARP Wisconsin. Going back to your comments about entitlement reform, I know that Social Security and Medicare has obviously been a priority for you throughout your career. Does that represent a wish list item for you at this point, or do your colleagues in the Senate and the White House agree?
No, it's more the first thing you said. More of a wish list of mine, but I don't see us tackling it this year. Do you know why this is a wish list? You know, look, I went to college partly paid for by my Social Security survivor benefits. It's an essential, it's probably the most important program. That Medicare and Social Security are the two most important programs arguably we've got. They're going bankrupt. You know, we're already cashing in the IOUs for Social Security, and then when those go away in the early 2030s, people get an automatic across-the-board 23% benefit cut. I would like to prevent that from happening. And the sooner we act to prevent that from happening, the easier it is to prevent that from happening. I just think it's being honest with people. Same with Medicare. More than half of Medicare's financing today is borrowed money, borrowing from the next generation. I think there are better ways of running Medicare so that seniors get the guaranteed choices, the guaranteed health care that they want, the choices they want, and making the program solvent so that the next generation actually has a Medicare program to use. So, you know, I know that that's not necessarily the smart political thing to say, but I think it's the right thing to say. And I just think that that's important. Now, having said that, the budget tools we use, we call it reconciliation. You can't use that for Social Security. It doesn't apply to that. So no matter what you do, you're going to have to find bipartisan consensus to fix these thorny long-term problems. And we don't have that right now, that bipartisan consensus. That is really the ultimate problem with our debt and deficit in the future. So I would like to find a way, and I don't know what exactly that's going to be, how do we get bipartisan consensus to fix these looming debt problems we've got on the horizon, which are really age-based problems. It's just, we have a 90% increase in the retirement population in America, but only a 19% increase in the tax-paying population coming behind them. And the programs grow faster than inflation. They grow faster than wages and tax receipts. They grow, 5 to 8% a year. It's just a mathematics thing. And the sooner we put good reforms into these programs so that they work better and that they're solvent and they don't go bankrupt, the better off we're all going to be. And I just think we ought to have a good bipartisan conversation about how to do that, but that's clearly not where the political system is today.
Okay, over here now.
Hi, Paul.
Oh, hey, Bill. How you doing?
Quick question for you. Something that keeps me up at night is thinking about what future presidents and their unelected bureaucrats can do to create more regulations. Now, thankfully, your House passed the REINS Act.
Yeah.
And I know you talk to Mitch on a regular basis. Where is he as to putting that on the agenda?
Yeah, we passed it a year ago. Okay, it's just what Bill's talking about is the REINS Act. Wisconsin does this. About 31 other state legislatures do this. I think, Dave, you know about this. You pass a major law, and when a legislature writes a law, there are some vagaries in it, right? And the executive agencies that implement that law fill out executing that law with regulations. And the point of this is we want to make sure that the elected officials at the state government in this case, or the federal government in our case, are the ones writing the actual laws we experience. Because we think it's very important that we are a self-governing nation, that we govern ourselves through our elected officials, and that the laws that we live under, that we experience, are not written by unelected people in executive agencies. And so we think it's a matter of self-determination, of constitutional government. And so the REINS Act basically says major regulations that have the full force of law have got to come back for a final approval or amendment by Congress before they go into effect, so that you make sure that the big regulations, unelected bureaucracies, are signed off on by your elected representatives before you experience them. We just think that it's really common sense, and it restores this accountability, transparency, and self-government. That will take 60 votes to pass over in the Senate because of the way the filibuster works. You ask any House member about the filibuster, you'll get an hour of frustration. We've passed, like I said, more bills in the House this last year than in about 20 years in our president's first year. And over 400 of those bills are still over in the Senate. And that's one of those 400 bill. One of the reasons is it takes them a lot longer because they're debate rules to pass bills. They have to do people. They call it the executive calendar. They have to confirm judges, ambassadors, people that populate the administration. And that takes up to 30 hours per person. And we don't do that in the House. So we're a little more prolific on legislation. The Senate's behind on that. And then anything that's not in reconciliation or not a personnel issue can take 60 votes to pass. So we are hopeful that they will bring this up. But right now, they're busy trying to get the Trump administration populated still. They're busy trying to fill out, undersecretaries of labor and commerce and defense and the rest. And they're right now, they spent all last week on judges, getting judges on the bench. So when they can clear out what they call this executive calendar, they intend to go full-time on legislation, and that's one of the things I'm hoping that they take up. Now, in order to get it done in law, they're going to have to get 60 votes, and we'll see if they get it.
Okay, back in the back of the room again.
Hi, Paul. Dr. Jack Mayer, Janesville, Wisconsin.
Hey, Jack.
I'm a trustee with the State Medical Society's Welfare Trust. The question concerns association health plan rules.
Yeah.
There's the proposed rules. It looks like it's going to make it impossible for some existing plans to continue because of the underwriting rules. Is there any discussion perhaps about or thoughts about maybe grandfathering some of the existing plans like ours?
It's a really good question. We passed legislation that would do that, but that legislation, it's just the same story I told Bill over here, Bill Jake. It's stuck in the Senate. So the Department of Labor is going back and looking at their ERISA regulations, and then they're expanding those ERISA regulations to allow these. Give me what you've got so we can help make sure that your voice is heard, because they're going to have a comment period. So the Department of Labor is going to put these regulations out about how they're going to implement ERISA, which is a multi-state regulatory platform. So it's important that if you see a problem with this regulation, you let us know, so we can get those concerns considered while they finalize these regulations. What you're going to see is a first draft, not the final draft. And so please just give me something. You can give it to Paige right behind you if you got something with you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just give us a call.
Okay, dairy question.
Hi, I'm representing the Dairy Association here in the state, Tim Trotter with Edge Dairy Cooperative. One thing the dairy farmers across the state are seeing really depressed prices right now. Yeah. And we're dealing with a lot of issues like you mentioned with immigration, and the tax reform is a big help. Thank you. Thing that we're looking at is really being able to expand and really take dairy products globally, because that's really important to our cheese processors. We're over $44 billion worth of revenue annually. We'd like to see that increase, and we need an opportunity to produce for a market. So what is your plans for us with NAFTA?
Yeah, for what? What was the last part you said?
What is your plans for NAFTA?
NAFTA, okay, you said, yeah. I don't think we should pull out of it. I think we should work from within it. Having said that, the Canadians are really frustrating on this issue. I got to tell you. The biggest challenge that I see with a rewrite or an update of NAFTA comes from the north, and it's softwood lumber and dairy. And I can go on and on about dairy. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think they're dumping. They're high-cost producers dumping a lower-cost product, unfairly putting us out of business. If it was pure market competition and they were really producing value at a lower cost, then that would be one thing, but that's not what's happening here with Canada. And so I think these negotiations need to help settle those things. Having said that, off the top of my head. I could be. Don't fact check me on this, fact checkers, because I may be wrong.
Wait a
on
minute.
this,
Oh yeah, let's
you know,
check.
hang on. So, if we just pull out right away, Mexico's a massive cheese market for us, huge, and I think the tariff goes up to like 40% overnight. So don't fact check me on that. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but I haven't looked at those tariff schedules for about 3-4 months. But that could be really devastating to the dairy industry, to dairy prices. So this trade agreement does need to be modernized, updated. It was written before the internet existed. It was written before we had this enormous oil and gas play in North America. So there's a great opportunity to improve it on enforcement, on rules, on playing on dairy the right way. But what I don't want to do is see something that would cause a massive drop in dairy prices or a huge increase on the tariff against our exports, which this is an export business. In Wisconsin, it's those numbers, and it's a huge impact on our economy. So I think we can get this done right, and I think we've got to be tough negotiators and get a better deal, and that's what I would hope we can achieve.
I'm back.
Yeah, hi.
I'm here to close it out, so keep you on time, because you're going to go see some school kids in Greendale, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm
They'll
looking
probably
forward to
ask better questions than me. They probably know who Susan Collins is. There goes my vacation to Bahaba. Okay. This is a sensitive issue. Sorry, I'm bringing it up. Your future.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
everybody
but
asks me
wait
these
a minute,
questions.
though. You talked about entitlement reform, and that's not going to happen in this Congress, essentially, which means in order for you to lead it, you'd have to run for re-election. So
Yeah,
I
so
mean, why?
You sound like Craig Gilbert. Just kidding.
Well, that's not such a bad.
No, he's a great,
Yeah,
he's a good guy. No, what Jan and I do every single election, I think people are making more out of nothing here. There was this speculation, sort of gossip piece in D.C. That suggested that once my big signature issue of tax reform is done, why would I stick around and I'm just going to leave in January? That thought never even entered my mind, let alone did I discuss it with anybody. So that's just this bogus speculation stuff. There's a lot of other things to do than just tax reform. But what Jan and I always do, every cycle, every term, is in spring, we sit down and decide what we're going to do. And this year is no different than any other year. And so that's what we'll do in spring, like we always do in spring.
Okay, so it's entirely bogus, and you're not retiring.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. And like I said,
that's kind of a non-answer though.
Well, we make our decision in the spring of the election year every single term, and that's the decision. I'm not gonna. You think I'm gonna not talk to my wife and give you the answer? I'm not gonna do that.
No, I don't expect that. But
So we have a ritual.
I'm still trying to
we go
make
through.
news before your staff.
Yeah, no, there's no news to be made. Jan and I will go through our customary even-yeared ritual like we do when we do.
That must be a lot of fun talking about that.
Yeah, we do it every 2 years.
Yeah. Are you still having fun?
Yeah, there's a lot to do.
John Boehner misled you, didn't he?
Yeah, well, that's true. He knows. You can get things done. Everybody turns on the TV and they're pulling their hair out about government. But believe it or not, we're actually getting things done. So what I keep telling our members is, don't get distracted, get focused. We have people's lives to improve. We have ideas and solutions we believe in. Let's go get them done. We just rewrote the tax code for the first time in a generation, which was so sorely needed. We just overhauled the entire Veterans Administration to fix the problems like we saw in Toma. We just overhauled so many regulations. We now have put our country in track to be the dominant energy player and producer in the world. There are so many really good things on the cusp that we're doing to get this to be a great 21st American century. What I want to work on right now, I want to get the military back on its feet again. I want to get people out of poverty into the workforce and get this skills gap closed. And I want to make sure that we fix these issues. The president really wants us to focus on infrastructure this year. We're going to focus on infrastructure this year. You didn't ask about that, but that's one of the things we're going to be dealing with. So there's a lot to do.
All right. Well, thank you for spending time with us. Thank you, everybody here.
And thank you, Jeff.
We'll see you around.
All right. Thanks.